You see me or no? Don't see me? Well, you do see me because you're sitting right here, so you do see me. Should really move that closer. I didn't do this. I'm gonna. You see me? I'm gonna move forward a little bit, so I'll be a little closer. Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If you are watching, please say hi so I can see you. You said hi, Kim? Kim even said hi. I didn't get it yet. Now I got it. Kim, okay. Now, Kim, you can see me, you can hear me. Gewaldig. If you're watching on Chabad.org, haven't been on Chabad.org in a while. On Facebook, not Chabad.org, please say hi. Good evening. Okay, my friends. You ready? Ready. Okay, the ladies behind you are not ready, but that's fine. They'll be ready soon. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me just open this. Un momento. Let me just open. So, tonight is a very, very special class. Very excited. First of all, this is like our regular Monday night class. So, for those that only come sometimes JLI, you're welcome to come every Monday at 8 p.m. We have a class free of charge. That's a hint, by the way. This is a paid advertisement from our sponsor. L'chaim from the sponsor. So every Monday night we do a class called Me and the Bible, which is where we take a biblical character and we don't. It's not like a parsha class per se. It's much more advanced than that. I've been doing this for a few years and I really, really enjoy it. I take a person from the Bible and I find how their life story is actually a message for us in our own life story. How we are meant, their story, their challenge, what they went through in their lives is actually very much relevant to us today. Yes, maybe they had cows and sheep instead of cars and, and computers, but the human struggle and the human story is the same human story. It doesn't really change. And this is my own original class. It's not from JLI. It's not from anywhere. It's all week I think about it, and and it comes from the heart, etc. And this class is memory. Yitzchak ben Yosef, his neshama should have an elevation in Gan Eden. Now, we also just finished a fantastic course with JLI, which does a fantastic program called the Kabbalah of Meaning. And during this Kabbalah of Meaning, we were discussing how to find purpose and meaning in our everyday existence. How in our regular lives we can find purpose and how we can inject a sense of mission, not just in going to Shul on Yom Kippur, but even when you go to the doctor's office, even when you're at the dentist today, and even when you're brushing your teeth, and when you're doing you're going to work, and you're doing your regular errands, in your regular mundane existence, to recognize that there's an inherent purpose and mission in everything. And I'm not going to spend the time now reviewing. Good evening, Shira. Good evening, all watching online. I'm not going to spend the time now reviewing what we learned then. It was a fantastic course. If you want to get it's not publicly, it's not on Facebook, it's not public because it was a paid course through JLI. But if you want to see it, reach out to me. I'll be glad to send you the videos. It's all recorded. But the takeaway, if I had to condense the 6 lessons into 30 seconds to know what I'm going to address tonight, is that everything that happens in our lives, from the most mundane, seemingly unimportant places where we are, and the people with whom we are, and the things that we're doing are not just by chance. They're all part of a plan that God has for us. And this is true in time. This is true in space. This is true in our souls, as we discussed in the last lesson. In every place, person, interaction, and even in our very identity. As Jews, we inherently matter. We inherently have value, etc., etc. Now, during this, Michelle is here. Okay, the birds are watching. Baruch Hashem. Now, during this conversation, repeatedly, especially one of the classes, I got asked more or less one or other variation of the same question, which is, so what is the purpose in suffering? What is the purpose? Not when you're going to work and you're just bored and you have no interest in going to work. And why do you have to have that annoying, nerdy coworker that doesn't stop asking you pestering questions when you're trying to get your work done and they want to talk to you about whatever you're trying to get your work done? But what about when, God forbid, someone gets sick with cancer? What about when someone dies young? What about when, right? And this is actually probably the oldest question in all of Jewish existence, the question of why. And the question of why do people suffer and why do bad things happen to good people and where was God in the Holocaust, etc., etc. Basically, what is the purpose in pain and suffering, right? For those who are at the class, I believe in very short, succinctly summarize exactly the question that was put forward to me multiple times. Now, during the class, I was trying to follow curriculum. And the curriculum was specifically meant to be how to find meaning in everyday living. That was the clear objective of the course, not to deal with difficult theological issues. And there was no time or space to address what's really, hopefully for most of us, a purely theoretical question. But obviously, at some point, really all of us, at some point in our lives, go through pain. And at some point in our lives, we go through very, very difficult times, not just where they're challenging, but we see an objective to the challenge. Like you get laid off from work and you're building a business or whatever, like that's a challenge you work through. Okay. But then there's things where you find yourself in situations where you can't find any reason. I lost the page. Where you can't find any reason to the reason why you're suffering. Yeah, that's my first page of my notes. Yeah, okay. I mean, I know what I wrote, but I'm saying I'm wondering. Hey, that's not where my notes start. Yeah, because they all came out of the same printer, but it's okay. Printed the student pages first. Oh yeah. No, these are just like bullet. They're just notes. They're not. So the question is, when I'm in a situation where I'm not doing anything, where I have zero control over the situation and I'm stuck, so to say, even though we talked about the idea of not being stuck, and I don't want to repeat anything I said in the course, and I'm not going to repeat. I have limited time tonight, and I'm not going to repeat the idea of we're never stuck, and everywhere we are is for a purpose. But sometimes we feel helpless in a situation. So if you tell me that I'm struggling and I'm working hard, but I'm building a business, or I'm working hard, but I'm raising children, or it's challenging, it's difficult, it's painful, but I can see that there's some reason for it. Okay. I see this light at the end of the tunnel. And hopefully it's not an oncoming train. Yeah. But what about when, God forbid, a person has cancer, or a person is even worse, we'll talk about ALS, where they're paralyzed. A person, God forbid, suffers a death. Where do you where's the meaning? Where's it? You're not working towards something. You're not building something. You're not creating something. And so the question is, when a person is not just in a situation they don't understand, but when they're in a situation where they are unable to be productive. Let's say they're locked up in jail, for example. That may be a good example, not as dramatic as, right? Where you're not able to you're there against your will. You're not able to do what you used to do. You God forbid have a sickness or an illness where you're hospitalized. You're in bed, you had surgery, you can't move, you can't walk. Just today, I called someone in our community who had a surgery several days ago. They already have issues with one of their arms, and they had a surgery on the other arm, and they basically can't move either arm right now. And this is more or less a healthy person. They're not like an old cripple. They're a healthy person who right now is lying in bed, and they can't move either arm, and they're pretty helpless. I can imagine they're pretty miserable. I know myself after I had surgery, feeling incapable of taking care of yourself, being dependent on others, especially for men, especially if you're a very independent person, can be a very, very emotionally challenging place to be. And so that's the space we're going to talk about tonight. When the person is helpless, another good example is when they're old. They go to an old age home, sadly. Last week, I'll tell you one cute story. Last week, I took my kids to Harbor Chase to go. We did a menorah lighting primarily because Vivi, a dear friend of ours, a long-time member of the community, is there, but there's many other Jews in Harbor Chase. So we did a menorah lighting on Tuesday night in Harbor Chase, and my entire family went. Even because I didn't want to go, we all went together as a family and went to Harbor Chase. That was on Tuesday. On Wednesday, Karina, our secretary, told my wife, she overheard it, we had a Hebrew school party, a big party Wednesday. A lot of kids were here. And my son Shai was here, who's a very interesting kid. And this other girl from Hebrew school is here. Now, my older kids work in Hebrew school, volunteer, teach. I'm saying, Sidney and Mushka, Zaman, they all come, and Aleph Shem, and those that volunteer in Hebrew school, Bonnie and Randy. My older kids, they're amazing. Every one of my kids are amazing, and they volunteer and they help. So my son Shai, who's normal, he's only 8 years old. He's not normally here. He's turning 8 this week. He's not normally here on Hebrew school. So another girl asks him, when are you going to start working in Hebrew school? So he says, I don't know. Maybe when my parents get old and they need me to take care. That's what he says. You're like a kid. When they get old. So I don't know when they get old, what will happen then? So when they get old, they'll need me to take care of them so we don't have to put them into an old people's home. You understand? He was in old age, so he's like worried that we're going to get old. He's a 7-year-old kid, shooting 8. Well, I'll start helping in the show when we get old and we can't take care of ourselves. We need our kids to take care of them, take care of us, so we won't be in the old age home. But you go to an old age home, it's a very hard place to find meaning and purpose. You know, the people there are stuck there more or less, and they need to be there. They can't take care of themselves. They're not able to be independent, unfortunately. But it's a very emotionally challenging place to be. So this was a question that was asked repeatedly. And I said, we'll do a whole class. We'll do a separate class, and we'll talk about this. So I had time to think about this question. And there's two very, very different directions how to address this question. Why do people suffer? How do we find meaning in pain? One is the more classic rabbinic way, which is theological or philosophical, where we start to wax poetic about how everything God does is good, and God has a master plan, and trust. You got to trust that God knows what He's doing, and trust, right? And I could talk about this for a very long time, and there's many stories about this, there's many examples, and there's many beautiful theological ways of proving that we don't understand what is good, what is bad. I mean, what defines bad? Is taking a knife away from a kid bad, or is it good? It depends who you ask. Hold on. Whenever I ask a question, what's the answer? It depends. So is taking a knife away from a kid good or bad? It depends on who you're asking. If you ask the kid, taking the knife away is bad. Let's say they're playing with fire. Tonight, we had a little bond for my house as a custom to burn the leftover wicks for the menorah, and my nephews and nieces came over for a Hanukkah party. This afternoon was still Hanukkah, and they've been begging to do a bonfire already for like 3 weeks. And we didn't do it Saturday night. It was too sweaty. So tonight we did a bonfire. So now we have a fire, but we did So if a kid's holding this morning, so if a kid's holding a thing of fire, take it away from him. Is it good or bad? The kid will tell you the parent is mean. They're bad. They took it away from me. The parent will say, it's good I took it away, right? There's no neutral here. So if it's good or bad depends on who is the one talking. That's what the theory of relativity. What's the theory of relativity? We're standing on the earth, so we say the earth is stationary, it's the sun that's moving. If we be on the sun, you know what we'd say? The sun is stationary, the earth is moving around the sun. The reason why we think the sun is moving around us is because we're here and the sun is there. So, right, it's all, that's what the theory of relativity is. A little oversimplified, but that's the general idea. And so the whole definition of good and bad from a human perspective is not the same definition from a godly perspective. And we could talk about this for a long time. There's a lot to say on this topic. But there's another direction to this class. There's another direction, rather, to this whole discussion, which is not a philosophical answer, because the question is not really a philosophical question. the question, why is there suffering? Or how do I find meaning in suffering? And how do I uplift myself if, God forbid, I'm dealing with a debilitating illness or just old age or whatever other situation of helplessness I feel in my life? The question is really more of a emotional question. Meaning, some people are curious, they want to discuss it philosophically. But more people are asking the question because they feel stuck. They feel trapped. They feel like they're stuck in a situation with an illness, with a problem, with a whatever it is that's out of their control, and there's nothing they can do about it. It's not something they can fix. It's whatever their spouse, their kid, and there's nothing you can't fix your spouse, right? One day you discover that, and you're more or less you're stuck in the situation, and there's an emotionally painful question, which is, I'm suffering. I'm in a painful situation. That's where I am. That's facts. How do I find meaning in my pain? How can I emotionally change my perspective to be able to cope better with the situation that I find myself in? That's not a philosophical question anymore. That's more of a emotional question. And so tonight, I'm not going to address any theology about what is good, what is bad. God is good. God knows what he's doing. There's a master plan. I'm going to assume, and we're going to accept as a basic premise for anything I say from this point onwards, we accept that God is a good God. And we accept that everything God does is good. And everything has a reason. Everything has a purpose in the master plan. And we're accepting all that. Our faith is not shaken in any way. In fact, we believe in divine providence, which is what we talked about in the JLI course. And we believe that everything is from God and for a purpose. And my faith is rock strong. I'm not struggling with faith. All we're going to talk about today is how do we change our perspective to find meaning in that pain when I can't move. When the guy had surgery and he can't move either arm, and he literally can't move either arm, how can those days of recovery, how can that also be a period of purpose and meaning in his life? Because remember, we talked about the quotient. Some people say, I have a meaningful life because I did a lot of things, but this week was pretty, bad, was dead. Last week was purposeful. Next week might be purposeful. This week was a dead week. How can we find meaning and purpose in, here, sit right here if you want. How can we find meaning and purpose in everything? Okay? Sounds like a good plan. It's a hard job to do, maybe, because philosophical questions are easier to answer than emotional questions, right? Because the brain understands logic. But we're going to talk in a real way. Salachat. And good evening, all those who are watching online. I'm glad you're all joining us. Okay. So, as I already mentioned in passing, everything is by divine providence. Everything is by divine providence, which means nothing ever happens by accident. Nothing ever happens by accident. And I'm going to prove it in tonight's class. When this question was asked to me like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I said, well, push off for another week. Those weeks, I was teaching every day. And then was Hanukkah, was our end of the year campaign. So I couldn't teach on that Tuesday because it was the campaign. Last week was Hanukkah, so we had a big event and all that. So, and then this week I'm not going to be here tomorrow. So, okay, Monday, we'll pick this week. Got pushed to this week. In this week's Torah reading, and I was thinking to do a Monday night. Monday night's normally in the Bible class. It's not a philosophical class on. And then I'm thinking about this question over the weekend. I got to prepare. What am I going to say? And I realized that the answer to the question is literally in this week's character of this week's Torah reading. Like literally. I don't have to do any stretching, any rabbinic gymnastics. Literally just open up the Bible and you read this week's Torah reading, and the most emotionally powerful perspective, or rather actually the most emotionally powerful paradigm shift that you can find perhaps in the entire Bible is in this week's Torah reading. So this week's regular Monday night programming of Me and the Bible will now begin with a regular me in the Bible class, which will answer this very, very difficult question of how do I find pain? How do I find meaning in pain? Who is the main character of this week's Torah reading? Yosef. You all know the story. Yosef is sold by his brothers as a slave to Egypt. They're very jealous. He has all these dreams of greatness. They sell him as a slave to Egypt. Yosef goes to work in the house of Potiphar. There he's very successful. We talked about this last Monday night. And then he becomes framed by the wife of Potiphar, and he ends up in jail. In jail, he's again successful. And in jail, he becomes like the helper of the chief of the prison. And there he meets a butler and a baker that had dreams. He interprets their dreams. He becomes, later when the butler gets out of prison, tells Pharaoh, the Jew in there that knows how to interpret dreams, and he interprets the dreams of Pharaoh of the 7 fat cows, the 7 skinny cows, right? The 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. And he tells Pharaoh, there's going to be 7 years of plenty when everything will be good, followed by 7 years of famine. Start collecting now for the 7 years of famine, which is what makes Yosef. He saved Egypt, the whole world, the whole region came to Egypt for food, including Israel, the whole land around, not just the land of Egypt. That's why the brothers went to Egypt to buy food, because in Israel they also had no food. Correct. So there's no food everywhere. So Yaakov tells his sons, go down to Egypt to go find food. They go down. Yosef has been checking the roster of everyone coming through immigration. You know what I'm saying? In some country they check who's coming in. So he has a list. He sees the brothers came. He calls them in. Again, I'm making the story short. You all know the story. He says, you are spies. They say, we're innocent. He takes Shimon as collateral. Says, go back and bring your brother Binyamin to me. They finally bring Binyamin back to Egypt. When they come back to Egypt, Pharaoh said, Yosef puts his silver goblet that he had pretended was a magical goblet. He would listen to the goblet. He fed them all dinner. He was listening to he was like tapping the goblet, saying, oh, you're the oldest. You say, here, you had this kind of crib. You tell them stories about their childhood as if he knew it from this magical goblet that and he hides this magical goblet in the sack of wheat, of produce of Binyamin. They leave the city in the morning. He sends his son Menashe to go chase them, says, why did you steal the goblet? And sure enough, they open up the sack of Binyamin, and the goblet is hidden there in the sack. They come back to the palace, and Yosef says, Binyamin will be my slave for trying to steal my goblet. The rest of you are free to go back home to your father in Israel. This is the moment of truth. Will the brothers finally fix what they did 22 years earlier when they ignored the cries of their brother, or will they stand up to defend him? And they succeed with flying colors. Yehuda comes before Yosef. He says, I'm ready to fight you. Take me as a slave instead of my brother. I'm stronger. I'm a better worker. Let him go to my father. I'll stay here instead. And if you refuse, I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to die for him. At that moment, Yosef sees how his brothers have changed. He sees that the same Yehuda that had said 22 years earlier, what gain will we have by letting him die in the pit? Let's sell him for some money that we can buy shoes. Let's sell him. Is the same brothers now saying, let me be a slave instead of my brother Binyamin. At that moment, what happens? Chapter 45 begins. Chapter 45. Here we go. I'm going to read it inside the text. It's a very, very, very powerful chapter. Now, Joseph could not bear all those standing beside him. And he called out and he said, take everyone away from me. So now no one stood with him. When Joseph finally revealed himself to his brothers, he sends all the Egyptians out of the room. And Joseph wept out loud. So loud, the Egyptians heard and the house of Pharaoh heard that Joseph was crying. And Joseph says to his brothers, the famous words of the Torah, Ani Yosef, ha'od avichai, I am Yosef, is my brother still alive. Most powerful words in the Bible, just so you know. Like if you can imagine the emotional tension in the room. And the brothers are so embarrassed now, knowing that this is their brother that they sold as a slave, Yosef. What did the brothers do? They start shrinking away in fear. The brothers could not answer him because they were startled by his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, please come close to me. And they drew closer. And he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Now comes the important verse. But now, do not be sad and let it not trouble you that you sold me here. For it was to preserve life that God sent me before you. For already 2 years of famine have passed in the midst of the land, and for another 5 years there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to make for you a remnant in the land and to preserve it for you, for a great deliverance. And now he repeats, you did not send me here, but God sent me here. And he made me a father to Pharaoh, a lord over all his household, and a ruler over the entire land of Egypt. This, my friends, is without a doubt one of the most emotionally powerful paragraphs in the entire 5 books of Moses. Without a doubt. It's the moment when Yosef finally reveals himself to his brothers. And at that moment, the brothers are obviously, understandably shocked. They don't know what to do with themselves. They don't know where to hide themselves. They want to be like buried alive in the ground. They don't know what to do with themselves. This is the guy that had cried out to them saying, please spare my life. And they chucked him into the pit. And now he's standing with authority over them. He's the viceroy of Egypt. They're at his mercy. And what does Joseph do? He says, don't be distressed. Don't feel bad. It's not your problem. It's not your fault. This is all part of God's mission. You tried to sell me as a slave, but you didn't. God sent me here for a reason, to make me a master over Pharaoh, a lord over all of his household, and a ruler over the entire land of Egypt. He's comforting them. Understand what's happening? He is comforting them. Now, you could just say that Yosef is like in denial of his own emotions. That Yosef somehow suppressed his own natural trauma. And some people studying the Bible today would probably want to say that. Yosef ignored himself. He wasn't in touch with his own needs. He had lost touch with his own, what was important to him. But if you read the Bible carefully, you know that's not true. Do you know how many times the Torah tells us that Yosef cried? In the entire Bible, there is no one, in all of Tanakh, in all of Jewish history, there is no one that is described as crying more than Yosef. 8 times the Bible, black and white, tells us that Yosef cried. It goes through all 8 by heart, but the first time was when he meets his brother, when he sees the brothers talking amongst themselves, saying we're guilty because we ignored our brother's cries in the pit. Second time was he meets Binyamin. Third time is after he reveals himself over here. Next time he meets his father Yaakov. Next time is when his father dies. When after his father dies, when his brothers come back to Yosef begging for mercy, again he cries 8 times. In last week's parsha, this week's parsha, next week's parsha, he cries and cries and cries. So Yosef is not an emotionally disconnected human being. He's very emotionally aware. And he's carrying a lot of pain. He's carrying a lot of hardship in his life. Can you imagine today someone who will get sold as a slave by their brothers, be falsely framed by their boss for a crime they didn't commit, spend time in prison? You know how much trauma they would have? You know how much therapy they would need? You know how much... No therapy in the world would be enough for them. They will be justified in being the most bitter, angry, vengeful person. And then we'll say, I can't blame him. Look at the trauma of his childhood. It's his father's fault. It's his brother's fault. It's everyone. Right? That's what happened today. And instead, Yosef is telling the brothers 2 things. Take them point by point. The first thing he's saying to them, which you already see in verse number 5, you see it again in verse number 7, and you see it again in verse number 8. What do you see in these verses, especially in verse 5 and verse 7? If you're watching on my personal page, I'll share my screen again. Just lost my mouse. I'll share my screen again so you can see the verses. Chapter 45, verse 5. And again, verse 7. What is Yosef saying to the brothers? What's the key distinction?
It was God.
God, right. So meaning, you tried to sell me here. But I wasn't sold. I was sent. And again, in verse number 7, he uses the word, God sent me before you. Here, listen, in verse 5, you see clearly this distinction between being sold and being sent. You don't feel bad because you sold me. You wanted to sell me. But that's not what actually happened. You know what really happened? God sent me before you. What is the difference between being sold or being sent? What is the difference between being sold or being sent? Anyone?
Was God's purpose?
Being
He had a purpose for him to be sent.
exactly. Meaning, when you're sold, what is being, you know what's sold? You sell a cow, you sell land, you sell property, when you're sold, you're a passive victim. You have no control. You don't get to determine what's going to happen to you, who's going to buy you, where you're going to go. To be sold means I'm a passive victim of whatever's happening. Companies are sold and all the people will get laid off. Objects are sold. When you are sent, you're an active participant. You are being sent for what you can contribute, what you can do, what you can bring to that place.
Well, you said the brothers changed. Yeah, they changed because their father couldn't take another loss.
Yeah, of course. You explained the reasons why they changed.
But yes, the father suffered a terrible loss.
100%. But what I want to focus on is how Yosef rewrote the story of his life. It's called narrative therapy, I think, right? That's what they call it today? Narrative therapy, yeah?
But in this case, you can see like there was a purpose, something good came out of it. Even sometimes when people have a very bad illness, maybe they had to learn to be humble, to have compassion or something like that. But what meaning can we give to Holocaust, to October?
One second. First, before you get to the Holocaust on October 7th, absorb this. If you're going to right away not absorb it because you're worried about October 7th, you won't appreciate the tremendous power of what the story is telling us. Yosef didn't say, I was sent only 22 years later. For 22 years, Yosef has been saying, I am sent here for a purpose. Now, it's true that he was lucky enough to see the purpose, but that was only 22 years later or 15 years later. For 12 years, he sat in prison. He sat as a slave. And we already learned a class about Yosef's time as a slave and as a prisoner. Last week, we had a class on Yosef's time as a prisoner. And what happened? He was the most successful prisoner. He didn't go into prison depressed, negative, helpless, feeling like a sold victim. Yosef went into prison saying, I have no idea why. I can't imagine how this is good, but it must be. I was sent here. This is the first distinction we need to make, is to change the word sold to sent. Change the word helpless to sent. That word is a huge, huge distinction in our narrative therapy, which means often we think that for me to be objective, purposeful, or giving something productive is what I'm looking for. Being productive, I need to have I need to give, I need to produce, I need certain tools. Yosef was far away from everything important to him. Yosef was in a place where he had seemingly nothing. What did he have? Especially in those first years, he had nothing. But Yosef never became depressed. It wasn't like Yosef was doing therapy now for 22 years. You understand? It's not like Yosef was depressed and he was bitter and he was negative and he was full of anger and vengefulness. And now he said, now I understand why it happened. That's not what Yosef is saying. Not saying, now I understand why. He's saying, you try to solve it, but that's not what happened. What happened 22 years ago is not what you think happened. You're sad. Let's read the verse 5 again. Read verse 5. What's he saying to the brothers? You are sad. Why? Because you think that I ended up in Egypt because you sold me. That's not what happened. Don't be sad because you didn't sell me. If you had sold me, then you should be sad, but you didn't sell me. God sent me for a purpose. Now, I'm going to get to another point over here in what Yosef is saying. But I want this. This is a point of tremendous value in and of itself. Knowing that God, so to say, hasn't lost your file. Knowing that God has a purpose for you and that your very being in the place is because there's a reason for you to be there. I'm reminded of a joke about this old man who used to go to shul every day, and then one day stopped going to shul. Stopped coming. And the rabbi happens to be walking down the street a few months later. He sees this, Abe sitting on the park bench. He says, "Hey, what happened to you? You used to come to synagogue every morning. We haven't seen you in a few months." So Abe tells the rabbi, everyone, I'm 98 years old. Every single one of my friends have already died. I'm the only one still living. I think God has forgotten about me. And I don't want to remind him that I'm still around, so I'm keeping a low profile for now. Under the radar. I don't want to remind him. I don't want to get in his face. Yosef understood that where I am is not because God forgot about me or God allowed people to change my destiny or some sickness came upon me or whatever it is, to recognize that where I am here for a purpose. I am here for a mission. Now, I could explain theologically how that is and how everything God does is good, but that's not what we're trying to do tonight. What we're trying to do is to change our mindset, to change the way we tell ourselves our own story. Not that I'm a victim of that person. I'm not a victim of what she said or she did or whatever. I'm not a victim of that car accident or a victim of that illness or whatever. I am where I am because God put me here for a reason. I want to tell you a story, okay? Later, I'm going to show you a video about a rabbi called Yitzi Horowitz. If you ever heard of Yitzi Horowitz? Yitzi Horowitz is a Chabad rabbi from Temecula, California. 7 years ago, I think it is already, maybe more, he was diagnosed with Gruber's ALS. ALS is basically a illness that takes away all of your muscle function, and so the brain is still functioning. The brain is working, but over time, your body stops working. You can't walk, you can't move, you can't swallow, you can't talk, you can't do anything that requires any muscles. You literally can't chew and swallow. You can't anything. And you're literally a prisoner in your own body because the brain is aware of what's going on. The brain is not affected by it, but the body shuts down. It's one of the worst kinds of illnesses you can imagine. This Chabad rabbi, Yitzi Horowitz, was a young father, I think, of 5 kids at the time. He was in his 30s. I don't have the exact, he's a very well-known, he's very inspirational. I'm going to show you a video of him. We'll end the class with a video of him. He gets his diagnosis. He's a young, active rabbi, and he's a fun guy, and he played music, and he was one of the people that are like the life of the party. He would dance and sing, and he was a talented, very talented rabbi. And he gets his diagnosis of ALS, which wasn't that easy to even get the diagnosis. He started having issues and went to the doctor. They did regular testing. Took months till they got a conclusive diagnosis that he has ALS. Horowitz writes the following story. I've said this before. The day he went to the doctor's office, they were going to get the results of this scan or whatever it was. They will finally conclude. They were already worried about ALS to conclude if he does or does not have ALS. Comes to the doctor's office, and the doctor gives them the report and says, you have ALS, 100%. He gives him a prognosis, how long it'll take till his arms stop working and his legs, and until he can't stand, until he can't swallow, until he can't talk. And the doctor explains to him exactly what's going to happen. Says, here's no, you have to go to a specialist to deal with it, and there's nothing else I can do for you. You have to go to an ALS specialist. There's only a few of them, but this is for sure 100% what it is. He walked out of the doctor's office, walked into the hallway, and burst into tears. He knew that his life, as he had lived his life until now, was more or less ending. It will take some time. It didn't happen in a week. It took a year, whatever it took. But I pray he read about it. He understood that it's a very, very bad prognosis. Very, very bad news from the doctor. And he literally burst into tears. He finally composes himself. He walks out of the building into the parking lot where his car is. As he's walking to the parking lot, he sees another person. I thought it was an older woman tripped on the parking thing, but I just read it now before. It was a person having a seizure. Person in the parking lot young person was having a seizure in the parking lot. And he ran over, and he was so healthy at this time, and he's helping this person sit down, like ground them so they don't hurt themselves till the seizure passed, and they were okay. He gets into his car. And he realized at that moment as he got into his car that God had just sent him an unbelievably powerful message. God had just sent him the most powerful message that even though you've just been diagnosed with ALS, which is a debilitating illness, and you're going to feel like you can't help and you can't be productive and you can't still give to others, right after the diagnosis, he had the chance to help someone that was worse than him, that needed his help. And God was basically telling him a message that he got there in the car, that you can still help. You can still have purpose. You can still be needed, even with your illness. That's the first message. Before we get to what's the reason why, that's already asking for theological answers. Just to be able to change our self-narrative, to change the way we talk to ourselves. I don't know why. I can't explain it yet. But the fact that I'm in this hospital, the fact that I'm in this illness, the fact that I'm in this family, the fact that I'm in this stuck relationship, whatever it is, whatever I'm stuck in, I'm here. I don't know why, but the fact that I'm here is not because my brother sold me. It's not because someone tried to hurt me. It's because God sent me. Makes
story, very powerful. The women who were so-called stuck in Chicago, the backstore.
Yes.
And they called the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said,
No one's stuck. Right. So the story is, I'll repeat the story. Yeah. So the woman went to the Sheikh Chabad conference in Detroit, Michigan, and there was like 20-something ladies from New York that flew on this flight to Michigan. At the end of the conference, there was a beautiful snowstorm hit Detroit. The entire airport is shut down. No flights are leaving for, I don't know, until the next day. This is before cell phones. So they go to a payphone, they put in a quarter, and they call the Rebbe's office to tell the Rebbe that there's 20-something ladies stuck in the airport. They know where to go. I'm saying the hotel is over. They're stuck in the airport in Detroit till the next day or to whatever. And the Rebbe's answer came back. The words you were stuck in the airport. The Rebbe's answer is that a Jew is never stuck. A Jew is never stuck anywhere. You are where you are because God put you there. It's a similar story with Rabbi Sachs, Jonathan Sachs, when the very, very first time he met the Rebbe. It's a beautiful story. The very first time Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wasn't a rabbi then. He was a college student in Cambridge University. And he took the summer off and he came to America to see America, and he wanted to meet all the big rabbis of America. He's a very, very deep thinker, Jonathan Sachs. He had some strong questions on God and whatever. And he wanted to talk to some rabbis and get some answers. And he took a Greyhound bus across the country. He was touring, as some relatives. He was going to meet different rabbis. He scheduled a meeting with the Rebbe. He finally got a call he can come. He took a Greyhound bus from California to New York, came to the Rebbe's office late at night, and the Rebbe started to answer his questions. And then the Rebbe started to turn the tables around. And the Rebbe started asking him questions that no other rabbi had done. What's Jewish life like in Cambridge University? Is there kosher food in Cambridge? How many Jewish students hang out together? Is there a social life for the Jewish students? Like the Rebbe was interrogating him. How do the Jewish students interact and how do they socially deal with no kosher on campus? The Rebbe was basically telling him, you got to take ownership. You got to become a leader in the community of students in Cambridge and get kosher food and create events for the Jewish students. So he started saying, the situation I find myself, and these were his words, very English, as he says a story. I've heard him say the story multiple times. Very politely, as a good English boy, to politely tell the Rebbe, thank you, but no thank you. So he said, the situation I find myself in, and the Rebbe cut him off, which is uncharacteristic for the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, no one ever finds himself in the situation. You put yourself in the situation, and you can put yourself in a different situation. You're the master of your situation. You don't find yourself somewhere. You're not a floating, a lost and found sweater that a kid left in school or a water bottle. Everyone's after Hebrew school. At least one kid leaves their water bottle, right? You're not a lost water bottle. You're a human being with control over your own life. You're a master over your own destiny. And therefore, where you are is exactly where God wanted to put you. And it's a very, very powerful message. Very powerful message. Okay. Now, by the way, it's not a side note, but I didn't want to mix this with the message. The message is recognize you're sent. Sometimes, why are you sent? No, I'll say like this. I'll say so. The second thing that Yosef says. If you look again, I actually look at the commentaries today. I didn't see any commentaries address this clearly. But I'm wondering a little bit, and I'm going to look more. What is the difference between verse 5 and verse 7? If you look at verse 5 and you look at verse 7, it seems to be a little repetitive, no? Like, why is Yosef repeating himself? In verse 5, Yosef says, don't be sad. Don't you think you sold me here? But it was to preserve a life that God sent me before you. 2 years of famine, whatever. Verse 7, God sent me before you to make for you a remnant in the land, to preserve it for you for a great deliverance. What is he adding in verse 7 that's not in verse?
The fact that he's preparing for a great famine?
Yeah, yeah, so say more. You're right, but what are the words he uses? Deliverance. I'm here because I have a purpose to make a deliverance. And in fact, verse 8, he continues that. And now, you did not send me here, but God. Why? To make me a father over Pharaoh, a lord over all his household, and a ruler over the entire land of Egypt. Meaning there's two, again, this is my own, it's a little repetitive, but there's really two different things here. It's one thing, but there's two nuances, rather. It's not two, it's one thing, but two nuances. One is, I wasn't sold, I was sent. I have a purpose. The second point he's making, the second nuance is, from the beginning, there was a purpose of greatness that could only have been done here. I just didn't know what it was until the famine started. But God had a plan for me to do something amazing here. So the first, let me clarify the distinction. One is what he's telling himself, I'm sent. In his mind, he's telling himself, I'm sent. The second thing he's telling himself is, I'm sent for greatness. I'm sent for something greater than you brothers could do. I'm sent for something greater than I could have done if I was still living in Israel with you guys, with my family, with my father, with my natural habitat. So the first point is, I'm not sold, I'm sent. The second point is, I'm not just sent, I'm sent for deliverance. I'm sent for greatness. Again, it's all one statement. If you look at it carefully, there's two nuances here. Meaning, Yosef is not saying that you don't have free choice. He's not saying you're innocent for trying to sell me. He's saying, no, you guys try to sell me. He's not ignoring what the brothers did. You tried to sell me. You tried to hurt me. However, you are not the ones who write my story. The fact that you wanted to hurt me is irrelevant because God had a plan for greatness. God had a plan for greatness. And that's what he says, that God made me a father over Pharaoh. God made me a ruler over his household. I achieved a greatness I could only have achieved by being sent to this place. Meaning, there's a greater good here that I'm able to see now that I couldn't have seen before. But I know that this being sent was for greatness. Now, did Yosef see that earlier? Of course not. But he never lost faith that he wasn't only sent. He never lost faith that he was sent for greatness. And this is, I believe, the secret to why Yosef never became a bitter, negative, angry person. Because even when he was suffering, even when he's in a place of difficulty, even when he was in a place of darkness, he always knew the story is not over yet. Because God is writing my story. Now, why is this important? Why is this important? They say another story. It's a joke, or maybe it's a true story. It's probably a joke, but it's probably a story that could have happened, but didn't actually happen. But it could have happened. And the lesson is very relevant. What's the story? It's a very famous story. You know, there's some stories that happened, some stories never happened, and some stories that could have happened. Whatever. The story is as follows. There was once a very poor man who had a very, very small house, and he had a lot of kids and a very, very noisy wife who would complain a lot. And, you know, in a small house, a lot of kids, it gets a little claustrophobic sometimes. And they couldn't handle it, and they couldn't afford it. And so he comes to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, you got to help me. My house is too small. And all my kids are jumping on my head. And I have no privacy. And I can't hear myself think. And the kids never leave me alone. It's a hell of a house. You know the story? Ever heard the story? That's a classic. So what does the rabbi tell him to do? The rabbi says, you know, do you have any chickens? He says, yeah, in my backyard, we have a few chickens. That's how we get eggs. So the rabbi says, you know what I think you do? Bring the chickens you have, bring them into the house too. Bring the chickens into the house. That's a crazy idea. But he trusted the rabbi. The rabbi said. So now not only do they have 10 kids jumping on his, you know, the one-bedroom apartment somewhere in Brooklyn or, you know, in Shtetl in Russia, now he also has the chickens squawking and scrabbling and whatever at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know. It's terrible. A week later comes to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, I thought it was bad last week. Now it's really terrible. Rabbi says, you have a goat also? She says, a goat? She says, yeah, we have a small goat. She says, I think the goat should come into the house too. I think it will help. The rabbi says, a goat? Okay, he brings the goat. It's crazy. She thought about the chicken, but come back to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, you need to do something. I'm going to go crazy. The rabbi says, what other animals do you have? She says, I have a cow, but please don't say bring the cow. She says, the cow. Perfect. Bring your cow into your house, and then you're going to see all better. He comes home, his wife says, are you sure you have the right rabbi? I think we should find a different rabbi. Like, go find a different synagogue. I think we're giving up our membership. We're going to reform now. I don't know. Maybe we'll try Chabad. Maybe they're nice. No. But the rabbi said, and his wife says, we're crazy. There's no room. The chickens and the goats are in my bed. But the man was a very trusting man. The rabbi said, bring the cow into the house. The cow came in the house. Can you imagine the cow and the goats and the chickens? It wasn't even the bed anymore. It was chaos. He couldn't even wait a week. 2 days later, come to the rabbi and say, Rabbi, I'm going to go crazy. It's too much. So the rabbi says to him, take out the cow, take out the goats, take out the chickens, and tell me how big your house is now. He goes home, and all of a sudden, wow, his home is huge. Comes back to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, you're a miracle worker. My home is so quiet, so relaxing. There's no chickens when I sit down. There's no cow mooing in my ear. I'm a chaya. Could have happened. What's the point of the story, though? What's the point of the story? No, it's not that we don't appreciate. It's about perspective. Is a home big or small? Is a home big or small? There you go. It depends. It depends what kind of home you lived in before, right? So if you come into my home, maybe you'll say it's big. Maybe you live in a mansion. You'll say it's small. Doesn't, you know? It all depends. What's your baseline? What kind of home did you grow up in? What did you know? And that's how you determine. What's considered a lot of money, a little bit, it depends. So when we look at our lives, there's two aspects to our life. So how big is a house? There's two answers. How big is my house? So one answer is it's 3,000 square feet, whatever it is, right? The other answer is it feels like a big house. Or it feels like a small house. The square footage hasn't changed. The number of bedrooms hasn't changed. That's hard facts. But how much comfort, or we say how much harchava, how much expansiveness you feel in your home, that depends on your mindset. So now we come to one of my favorite topics. The difference between pain and suffering. You know the difference between pain and suffering? I call this class Finding Purpose in Pain. I deliberately did not call it Finding Purpose in Suffering. You know why? What is the difference between pain and suffering? Pain will eventually go away. Not necessarily. Some people live with chronic pain. That's, you know, pain is physical, and suffering is mental, emotional. Excellent. I heard an excellent example that explains this. None of you have kids in the home, so at least not anymore. So you have to go back in your childhood memory when your kids had Lego on the floor, okay? Right? You have kids. They're big kids. They're going, I don't have Lego on the floor in your house, but imagine when your kids were young playing with Lego. My kids love Lego, okay? Yeah, but listen to this example. So if you can imagine one day when your kids have little toys on the floor, especially Lego. Lego's a good example because you ever stepped on a piece of Lego? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? So the moment you step on a piece of Lego, at that moment, what do you experience? Pain. It's a physiological sensation that goes through the nerves on the bottom of your foot, up your leg, and you go, whatever word you say. I'm on camera, so we'll pretend like you say, oy vey, got to him. That's pain. The next moment, what you do after that, if you choose to say, oh, how cute, they were building a train tracks right here right in the middle of the hall. Or if you say, what's wrong with you guys? Why do I always have this? And now you start screaming at yourself or screaming at your kid. You say, this always happens to me. Now you're suffering. That was a choice you made. You can't choose whether or not to feel the pain that's physiologically running up your nerves when you step on Lego. But whether or not you react to it with suffering and you start berating yourself and you start letting that define your mood. Say, every day this happens to me. I live in a mess in the pigsty and the kids can't clean up for themselves. And I keep on trying to clean up and all this is right. You ever seen that happen before? Go back in your memory. Many years ago, because now you're all mature and older, you never do that. So that's suffering. There's the facts of our lives. You have an illness, God forbid, that's a fact. You have a home that's 500 square feet, that's a fact. But how you choose to process that, how you choose to emotionally look at the size of your home is completely in your mind. In your mind. So not only do you have to change the narrative from being, I was sold, I was sent, you have to say, I was sent for greatness. Because if you stepped not on a piece of Lego in the middle of the floor, but let's say you stepped on your ring that you were looking for that you couldn't find. Let's say you lost your ring. And now you step on the ring, oh, it's my ring. I was looking for that. What would be your reaction? Happy. The pain you felt when you stepped on that ring was the same pain you would have felt when you stepped on a piece of Lego. But do you see the Lego as a nuisance that doesn't belong in the floor? Or do you see it as the earring you were looking for and now you found it? It's the same pain. But the purpose, the reaction, the emotional state of your mind after depends on if you see this as a piece of Lego or as an earring. That's all it is. And this is what Yosef was unbelievably able to do. Yosef is a hero. He's a tzaddik. He's described as a tzaddik because it's very not easy always to control our emotions at this level. But he was able to control his emotions to the point that when he was in tremendous pain, he never suffered. Even when he was in tremendous pain, he never felt suffering. He felt, I have been sent for greatness. There is an end to this story. And if I'm reading the book and it's still sad and something, I haven't finished the book yet. Right? When you read a book, it can be sad. It can be, you don't feel like terrible. How could this be? Because there's going to be an ending. All happily ever after. This was Yosef's secret. Yes, the facts are he was a prisoner. The facts are he was exiled from his land. The facts are he was, a slave and all that. Those are facts. And he was not in denial of the facts. But he never saw them in the way of suffering. He saw them as the earring. He saw them as being sent for greatness. And this, my friends, is what I want to end off, going back to Yitzi Horowitz. And again, without this philosophy. but I don't have time for it. Yitzi Horowitz is ALS. God should give him a full shlema. But Yitzi Horowitz didn't say, I'm suffering, I'm in a bad situation. Okay, God sent me. He said, God sent me to do greater than what I could have done before. I'm just thinking. Maybe I should show. Maybe if you guys want to say, I'll show you the video. Chad, I think, showed it for the woman in Torah and Tea. A few weeks ago, I was in New York for the convention, the Knesset Shluchim. And it was unbelievably powerful. Unbelievably powerful. They had a young boy from Israel speak. He shows a whole video. His name is, I forgot his name now. He's a shliach somewhere in Israel. And when he was a young boy, he was 2 years old, so he got some very, very terrible infection. He woke up one morning with a rash. The parents didn't know what it was. They went to, but it was like spreading quickly. Took him to the urgent care. And then he got sent to the hospital, and they ended up amputating both of his legs to stop the spread of the infection. And this young little 2-year-old boy went from like a healthy boy, literally the next day was without legs. And how much joy he brings. And then this young boy walked onto the stage after seeing the video, walked into the stage in front of the 6,000 rabbis and lay leaders in the room to standing ovation. And he spoke about how he is able to keep on being a shliach and all that. But then he said, another role model to me is someone who they haven't yet met in person, who's a Chabad rabbi on campus in northern Israel. His name is Rabbi Prizam. I forgot his first name. He's a Chabad shliach on campus in the university. He's also a reserve soldier in the IDF. He was serving reserve duty on the day before Sukkot, or the day after Kippur. He was supposed to be released that day. And before he was released, he was checking there's an area around the camp to let you catch where the soldiers are, like their base. So he went like to the edge of the base, and there was obviously an old undetonated mine from 1948, I don't know, 56, whatever war was there, 73, whatever it was, there was a mine there. He was in Syria, and he stepped on the mine. He never lost consciousness. He lost his legs, plural. He was whatever. It's very, very powerful. So he has become a very, very inspirational person in Israel. You see videos of him dancing, Simchas Torah. This was on the day before Sukkot, in his hospital, but no legs. He's dancing. People came to visit him in the hospital, and he's dancing and dancing. He can't move his legs. He has no legs to move, but he doesn't have legs to move. He's sitting in the hospital. He's shaking himself with his hands like this, like he's like his whole bed is shaking. He's like that Simchas Torah, and he's like leading the dancing with joy. No sadness. I just lost my legs a week ago. He said a line, but he spoke. It was a live hookup from the hospital. He's still in the hospital in Israel. Been interviews. The most watched interview in Israeli TV was with this rabbi. I forgot how many millions of people watched this interview. But he said a line, very powerful, and it stuck with me. He said, people used to tell me that I'm always running around. Some rabbis were always running, right? Always running. So I used to run a lot. Now I have no legs, so I can't run anymore. So instead, it's time for me to fly. It's time for me to fly. Meaning not just that I'm not going to become depressed, and I'm going to say that I was sent. I'm going to recognize that if I was sent for greatness. Understand? This is why I'm so inspired by Yitzi Horowitz. He didn't just say, I got ALS, but I'm going to still be positive. I'll still be upbeat despite my illness because I know that God is in charge and God is good and all that. He said, I now am able to have an influence in ways I couldn't have before. And I'm going to utilize this opportunity to reach places I couldn't have reached before. So I was going to show the video, the last JLAC, because I'm going to save it for now. I want you to watch this video. I'm going to share it on my screen. If you're watching on my personal page, you can see I'm going to share it. If you're watching on Chabad.org, I'm going to turn the screen around as well so you can see. This is Rabbi Horowitz.
Los Angeles Rabbi Yitzi Horowitz is battling ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, but even as he is facing devastating setbacks, he is inspiring and strengthening people's faith all around the world.
I was talented. I could teach, lecture, sing, dance and play guitar. I was strong and handy. Within 2 years, I watched that all slip away. My muscles that played guitar, gave to my congregation and danced at weddings lost their functionality. They called it ALS. Over the past few weeks, I couldn't get my eyes to focus on the letters I wanted to write. Writing one word took as long as 5 minutes. I can't even begin to tell you how frustrating it was. I felt useless as a husband and father. Not being able to write Torah articles, I felt irrelevant. I was in jail. What possible purpose could I have if I couldn't communicate? Brave and wise, Dina said. On Shabbat, when you don't use the eye gaze computer, you are still significant and relevant. Even if you can only see and look at people, that is meaningful to us. If you are alive, it means that you are relevant to Hashem, and that you make a difference. For me, Emunah is the realization that God is real, that He has a plan for the world, and I am part of it. Everyone is a part of it, and everyone's part is important. So if He put me in this position, He must want something of me that I can only do in this position. When you see it this way, instead of feeling down when you are in a challenging situation, you are filled with a sense of purpose. It is now over 5 years since Hashem gifted me with ALS. While life is full of difficulties, pain, and suffering, there is so much to be grateful for. While I understand the hardships, I choose to focus on the positive parts of my life, and that keeps me going. There is my wife, my children, family, friends, and you. Even within the suffering and difficulties, I can still contribute and help others. Through my blog, I have the opportunity to learn and teach Torah. I forged new friendships with the teens and yeshiva boys that visit. Being crushed has brought stronger connections, new abilities, higher purpose and deeper meaning. I've been blessed with a voice that can't sing, with a body that doesn't work, so I dance to a new rhythm. I'm Yitzi Hurwitz, and I know that I matter.
So that's an extremely powerful. Move out of the way. It's very powerful. Why is that so powerful? He's not just saying, okay, I'm going to try and make the best out of about, like I'll make lemonade out of lemons. He's saying, I'm being crushed, help me make deeper connections, reach new people. Yitzi Horowitz, his friend, started a campaign for his birthday. He used to love putting on tefillin on everyone else. One of the first parts of his body to shut down was his arms. And he couldn't put on tefillin. He had to have people help him put on tefillin. And they started a campaign to get on his birthday. And by the way, he got his diagnosis on his birthday. That was the day he got his diagnosis. So his birthday was a very, very hard time because normally birthday's day you think about what you can do the year ahead. And your birthday, what am I going to do the year ahead? I'm literally a prisoner in my body. ALS is probably the most strong and stark example of being seemingly stuck in a helpless situation where there's nothing you can do about it. And yet, they decided to turn this birthday into a day of positivity, into getting people to do mitzvahs all over the world. They got like 10,000 people. I remember these campaigns. They do a birthday to get people to put on tefillin with a picture, tefillin for Yitzi. And then the next day, like 23,000 people. Meaning, to be a healthy rabbi, which obviously I wish him health, and he'd be doing his regular mission, but he wouldn't get 23,000 people to put on tefillin. He's able to have an influence and they're able to be an inspiration because of his challenge, which means but that's because he recognizes that. I like Rabbi Prizam in just lost his life. Maybe I'll put on the video if you want to stay afterwards. To be able to recognize that wherever I am is not because someone sold me, not because I got stuck somewhere, but to be able to tell myself, I'm here because God sent me. He didn't just send me, he sent me for greatness. And when we can tell ourselves that narrative, when we can speak to ourselves with this conviction, the way Joseph spoke to himself, with confidence that wherever he is, with all the pain that he has, but knowing that I'm there because God sent me there, so it may still hurt, but you won't be suffering because you know God sent you. You got it, my friends? Okay, any comments, any questions? If you want to stay, maybe I'll put on the other... like stunned silence in the room, huh? How many of you saw the kid that lost his legs and all that? Kha showed it. The girls saw it. Maybe I'll. Who would like to see it? And you know, if you don't want, it's fine. Now we'll end there. Thank you for that's watching. Thank you, Jessica, and yes, tell your kids that, and Megan, and Vicky, and Rosina, and Winston, and Lorna. Thank you all for watching us. Our personal page. 1 second. Okay, what happened to you? Did you guys lose connection? Hello, Corrine and Lester. Hello, Ellen. Hello, Harold. Hello, Bergs. Hope we all enjoyed. Okay. By the way, if you like this class, hint, hint, you're welcome to come back next Monday, 8 p.m. I don't know what the class will be just yet, but I promise it will be something meaningful and relevant to our lives of me and the Bible. God willing. Next JLI. Oh, next JLI. I meant to put up the flyers. I almost forgot. Next JLI. So officially, JLI is called it the next JLI. They're calling it fascinating responses or rabbinic response or something like that. I love JLI. I shouldn't say it's on record, but I already are. JLI produces the most amazing content, but their marketing team is leaves to be desired. Let's just say that. And so I made up my own title for the course. My title is From the Ages for the Sages, because that really defines what the class is. The class is from the ages across the entire spectrum of Jewish history, in all different countries, in all different eras, the kind of difficult, challenging questions that rabbis had to deal with. And so it's a halacha class, but it's really about what were the issues facing different communities in different countries at different times. And if you don't mind getting some of the flyers on the desk, whatever. I'll send you all an email. I'm going to go tomorrow. I'm supposed to go today, we'll go tomorrow. From the ages for the sages, please sign up. If you need a discount or a scholarship, let me know. And I think it's starting January 13th. Yes, sir. January 13th it is. That's correct. Yes, January 13th. From the ages for the sages. Anyway, Laila Tov. Good night, all my friends. If you want to sign up, it's mychabadcenter.org/JLI. Again, mychabadcenter.org/JLI. I'll put it into the comments. So if you want to join us for the next JLI class, you can. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed how to do this. Comment 1 second. I can't. Here we go. mycenter.org. / lost it. Thank you, Randy. My Chabad. Okay, I just posted the link. If you're watching and you want to join us for JLI, that is not going to be on Facebook, unfortunately, because it's a paid class. But again, the scholarship's available if you need. mychabadcenter.org/JLI. You're welcome to join us. If you need a scholarship, let me know. Shalom, Rosina from Townsville, Australia. We're from Australia. Shalom. And Beverly, excellent. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you, Jessica. I said thank you to all of you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you, Carmen. Glad you're watching from Texas. I'm glad to have you with us. Hopefully, see you again next week, same time, same place.